The chime of 12:30 echoed from a distant clock tower, as I found myself once again at the threshold of the Albany. It was a pilgrimage born of utter desperation, the final recourse after a night that had brutally stripped me of everything. The London fog, a sickly yellow shroud, clung to me, chilling my very core, a stark reflection of the frantic, aimless hours I'd spent wandering since my catastrophic ruin. My overcoat, once a comfortable symbol of burgeoning ambition and a modest inheritance, now felt like a grave shroud. Inside Raffles's bachelor chambers, the very stage of my disaster, little had changed. Baccarat counters still lay scattered across the gleaming mahogany table, stark reminders of my folly mingling with empty glasses and ashtrays overflowing with the stale remnants of other men's indulgences. A window stood ajar. A futile gesture meant to clear the air of cigar smoke and the scent of desperation. But instead, it merely ushered in the clammy, blurring fog, softening the sharp lines of the elegant room. Raffles himself, perpetually unruffled, had simply exchanged his dinner jacket for one of his many blazers. Tonight, a deep, absorbent burgundy velvet. Yet, he affected an air of theatrical surprise, his eyebrows arching as if my sudden appearance had dragged him from slumber rather than merely intruded upon his late-night thoughts. "Something misplaced, Arthur?" he inquired, his voice a silken, low murmur that always held a faint hint of amusement. He stood on the intricate patterns of his Persian rug, the very picture of effortless grace and composure. "No," I choked out, pushing past him without a shred of decorum, the word catching in my throat like splintered glass. The audacity of my intrusion, breaching his private sanctuary at such an hour, astonished even myself. I, Arthur Finch, a man once content with humble literary pursuits, now a disgraced gambler, found myself violating the private space of A.J. Raffles, the celebrated cricketer, a figure of effortless charm and immeasurable wealth. "Surely not a return for a rematch?" he continued, a fleeting smile playing on his lips. "I fear I'm ill-equipped to offer you vengeance single-handedly. My apologies that the others—" We stood facing each other by the hearth, the only source of warmth in the cool room, and I cut him short. My voice, when it finally emerged, was a raw, desperate rasp. "Raffles," I began, each syllable a battle. "My unannounced return at this hour must confound you. We barely know each other. I've never set foot in these rooms until tonight. But I did run errands for you at school, years ago, and you claim to recall me. While that offers no justification, I beg you, grant me 2 minutes of your time." Overwhelmed with emotion, I initially struggled for coherence. Yet his composed, handsome face, typically a mask of detached amusement, softened almost imperceptibly as I spoke. I was not mistaken. It was not pity, not entirely, but a flicker of genuine, if remote, concern. "By all means, my dear fellow," he replied, his tone surprisingly gentle. "Take as long as you need. Do have a Sullivan and make yourself comfortable." He extended his polished silver cigarette case. "No," I uttered, shaking my head with a profound despair that transcended mere refusal, my voice regaining its full timbre. "No, I shall neither smoke nor sit, thank you. Nor will you extend such invitations once you've heard what I have to disclose." "Indeed," he countered, lighting his own cigarette, one clear blue eye fixed unwaveringly upon me. The casual elegance of his gesture belied the keenness of his gaze. "And how do you possess such certainty?" "Because you will most likely cast me out." I cried bitterly, the raw anguish of my predicament finally spilling forth. "And you would be entirely justified. But there's no point in prolonging this. You are aware I lost over £200 just moments ago?" He nodded slowly, a thoughtful, almost solemn gesture. "I had no such sum on my person," I recall he murmured, a plume of smoke escaping his lips. "But I had my checkbook, and I drafted a check for each of you at that very desk." I gestured wildly towards the solid oak writing desk, where I had unwittingly sealed my fate hours earlier. "And?" he prompted, his voice retaining an unnerving calm. "Not a single one was worth the paper it was written on, Raffles. My bank account is already in overdraft." The words burst forth, a torrent of shame and desperate confession. "Surely a momentary lapse?" he inquired, a flicker of something unreadable momentarily crossing his blue eyes. "No. I have depleted everything, every last farthing of my inheritance, every single shilling." My voice fractured on the final word, a fragile echo of my vanished fortune. "But I understood you were quite comfortably situated. I heard you had recently come into a substantial sum." "So I did. 3 years past. It has been my undoing, my very curse. Now every penny is gone. Yes, I have been an utter fool. There has never been, nor will there ever be, such a fool as I. Is this not sufficient? Why do you not simply turn me out?" I slumped against the mantelpiece, bracing myself for the inevitable scorn. Instead, he began to pace, his expression somber. The rhythmic cadence of his soft, even footfalls on the rich carpet, a fitting complement to the luxurious furnishings of his rooms, was the sole disruption in the profound silence. "Could your family not intercede?" he asked at length, his tone surprisingly gentle. "Thank God!" I cried, the words torn from me with a raw, desperate relief. "I have no family left. I was an only child. I inherited all there was. My only comfort now is that they are gone, and will never know this ruin." I collapsed into a chair, not the inviting one by the fire, but a less prominent one lost in the shadows, burying my face in my hands. The shame was a crushing physical weight. Raffles continued his pacing, his silhouette periodically passing through the firelight, an enigma of calm amidst my internal tempest. "You once possessed a certain literary flair," he remarked at length, his voice almost musing. "Did you not edit the magazine before you departed?" "I distinctly recall engaging you for my verses. And literature, of all pursuits, thrives these days. Even a less astute mind can carve a living from it." I shook my head, my face still hidden. "No ordinary mind could erase debts such as mine," I mumbled, the sheer hopelessness suffocating me. "Then you maintain a flat somewhere," he pressed on, seemingly oblivious to my despair. "Yes, in Mount Street. And the furnishings within?" I laughed aloud amidst my misery, a hollow, bitter sound that echoed the emptiness within. "Every piece has been under a bill of sale for months." At this, Raffles halted, utterly motionless. His eyebrows rose and his stern, unwavering gaze met mine. Now that he knew the full extent of my ruin, there was no longer any need for pretense. Then, with a curt shrug, he resumed his pacing. For several minutes neither of us spoke. Yet, in his handsome, unperturbed face, I discerned my inevitable fate, my death warrant, and with every ragged breath, I cursed my own folly and my profound cowardice for ever having approached him. Because he had shown me a measure of kindness at school, when he was captain of the 11 and I his humble gopher, I had foolishly dared to hope for benevolence from him now. Because I was utterly ruined, and he possessed wealth enough to spend entire summers playing cricket and the rest of the year in leisurely idleness, I had absurdly banked on his mercy, his sympathy, his aid. Yes, despite my outward diffidence and humility, I had secretly relied on him, and I was justly served. There was as little mercy as sympathy in that curling nostril, that rigid jaw, that cold blue eye which never once acknowledged my plight. I seized my hat. I stumbled to my feet, ready to depart without another word, but Raffles positioned himself between me and the door. "Where do you intend to go?" he inquired. "That is my concern," I replied, my voice raspy with the sting of defeat. "I shall trouble you no further." "Then how precisely am I to assist you?" "I sought no assistance from you," I retorted, my words a desperate final attempt to salvage a shred of dignity. Raffles stepped closer, his gaze intense, piercing through the fog of my despair. "No," he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "You didn't. But you came here, didn't you? At this ungodly hour, bearing the weight of your ruin. You think I merely dabble in baccarat, Arthur? You think this life of leisure is funded by inherited wealth alone?" He gestured around the opulent room, then leaned in, his eyes gleaming with an unsettling intelligence. "My dear man, there are other ways to make a living in London, especially for a fool who isn't a fool at all when it comes to meticulous planning, precise execution, and a certain moral flexibility." My heart hammered against my ribs. "What are you saying, Raffles?" A slow, predatory smile spread across his face. "I'm saying, Arthur, that I am not merely a cricketer. I am a professional, a collector, if you will, of things others guard too jealously. And you, my friend, are about to become my apprentice." The words hit me like a physical blow. A chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the fog. Raffles was a thief? A criminal? The respected gentleman of leisure? The darling of society? It was preposterous. It was horrifying. And yet, in my absolute desperation, a tiny, insidious seed of fascination began to sprout. "But that's illegal," I stammered, the absurdity of my moral protest in my current state not lost on me. "Indeed," Raffles chuckled, a low, rich sound. "And yet, here you are, ruined by the perfectly legal pursuit of chance, which I assure you is far more predatory and less rewarding than my chosen profession." He paused, letting his words sink in. "Your checks, Arthur, will bounce by morning. Your reputation, what little remains, will be in tatters. Or you could join me for one venture, just one, enough to clear your debts and give you a fresh start, a substantial fresh start." He walked to a magnificent oak cabinet, opened it, and produced a leather-bound book, not a ledger, but a meticulously kept journal. He flipped through pages filled with sketches, dates, and cryptic notes. "I have a target in mind, a certain Mr. Silas Croft, an art dealer of questionable ethics. He's known for acquiring artifacts through dubious means, hoarding them, avoiding taxes and exploiting others. He has a new acquisition, an emerald necklace, rumored to be one of the lost Serpent's Eye jewels from the Indian subcontinent. A magnificent piece, I'm told, and frankly, Mr. Croft deserves to be relieved of it. My mind reeled. A notorious art dealer, a lost emerald necklace. It sounded like something out of a Penny Dreadful novel. You want me to steal it? We, Raffles corrected smoothly, shall relieve him of it. Think of it as a redistribution of wealth, Arthur, from those who hoard unfairly to those who appreciate it more keenly. He winked. Besides, I find the intellectual challenge quite invigorating, and the risk, well, the risk is the spice of life, isn't it? The room seemed to spin. My world, which had collapsed just hours ago, was now not merely shattered but twisted into a grotesque new form. A life of crime? With Raffles? It was madness. But the alternative was ruin, public disgrace, and perhaps starvation. My family's legacy, though modest, would be stained by bankruptcy. The thought of my parents, even in their graves, knowing my folly, was unbearable. One venture, I heard myself say. My voice barely a whisper, the desperation overriding my last vestiges of morality. Just one. Raffles smiled, a genuine, almost triumphant smile that transformed his handsome features. Excellent. Now sit down, Arthur. We have a great deal to discuss. And perhaps a real Sullivan might do you some good after all. The planning began immediately. Raffles was a man transformed. The languid idler disappeared, replaced by a meticulous strategist. His chambers became a war room. Blueprints of Mr. Croft's townhouse were spread across the baccarat table, now cleared of its counters and glasses. Aerial sketches, drawn with astonishing precision, detailed escape routes and potential pitfalls. He spoke of security systems with the knowledge of their designers, of staff movements with the insight of a seasoned detective, and of weak points with the keen eye of a predator. My role, it seemed, was to be his gopher once more, but on a far grander, more dangerous scale. I was to conduct surveillance, memorize routes, and act as a lookout. He tested my memory, my powers of observation, my nerve. Days blended into nights filled with hushed conversations, maps, and diagrams. I learned to read the subtle language of London's alleys, the rhythm of its patrols, the telltale signs of a careless servant or an overconfident homeowner. My fear never truly left me, but it was slowly overshadowed by a strange, almost intoxicating fascination. Raffles's mind was a labyrinth of brilliance, and following its intricate paths was both terrifying and exhilarating. He had an answer for every contingency, a backup plan for every problem. He moved with the quiet confidence of a man who was always 2 steps ahead. "The serpent's eye," Raffles murmured one evening, tapping a spot on the blueprint, "is said to be housed in a wall safe behind a rather tasteless tapestry in Croft's private study. He rarely uses the study, but for his most prized acquisitions, it seems. And he trusts no one with it, not even his private secretary." The night of the heist arrived, shrouded in a fog even thicker than the one that had accompanied my desperation to Albany. It clung to the gas lamps, turning them into halos, muffling the sounds of the city. We moved like ghosts, Raffles in his dark, tailored clothes, me still feeling clumsy and out of place in borrowed black. The air was heavy with the scent of damp earth and anticipation. Infiltration was seamless. Raffles, with a set of tools that looked more like surgical instruments than a burglar's kit, made short work of the conservatory window. We slipped inside, the silence of the house pressing in on us, broken only by the frantic hammering of my own heart. Every creak of the floorboards, every distant hoot of an owl sent jolts of pure terror through me. I was a fish out of water, a literary man in a den of thieves, and the irony was not lost. We navigated the silent, opulent halls, our footsteps barely whispers on the thick rugs. Raffles moved with an almost balletic grace, a shadow among shadows. He knew the layout intimately, every shortcut, every hidden alcove. We reached the study. The tapestry, gaudy and heavy, was indeed there. Raffles swiftly moved it aside, revealing a small, unassuming safe embedded in the wall. This was his moment. He produced a set of delicate instruments, his fingers moving with surgical precision over the safe's dial. The faint clicks and murmurs of the tumblers filled the oppressive silence. I stood guard by the door, my eyes scanning the dark corridor, my ears straining for any sound. Every second stretched into an eternity. Sweat beaded on my forehead, cold despite the lack of exertion. Then, a soft, satisfying click. The safe door swung open, revealing a velvet-lined interior. Nestled within, gleaming with an otherworldly light, was the serpent's eye necklace. Emeralds, perfectly cut, shimmered like captured starlight, strung together with intricate gold work that resembled a coiled serpent. It was breathtakingly beautiful and utterly illegal in our hands. A sudden, sharp sound from downstairs, a creak, louder than any floorboard. My blood ran cold. "Raffles!" I hissed, my voice barely audible. He froze, scooping the necklace into a small padded pouch. His eyes, usually so calm, held a flicker of urgency. "Downstairs," he whispered. "The kitchen entrance. Quickly." We retraced our steps, a hasty retreat now, our stealth turning into controlled urgency. The creaking continued, sporadic, muffled. Was it a servant? A guard? My mind raced, picturing arrest, prison, the ultimate disgrace. We reached the kitchen, a cavernous space filled with the scent of stale cooking. Raffles gestured towards a back door, which led to a narrow alley. As he fumbled with the locks, a low moan echoed from the pantry. Raffles pushed me out first. "Wait in the alley," he commanded, "and keep watch. I'll be right behind you." I stumbled out into the damp, cold night, my heart still hammering. I pressed myself against the brick wall, straining my ears. The alley was dark, save for a faint glow from a distant street lamp. Moments later, Raffles emerged, his expression unreadable. He closed the door silently behind him. "What was that moan?" I whispered, my voice trembling. He gave a dry chuckle. "Mr. Croft's cook, it seems, a rather heavy sleeper by the looks of it, and prone to nightmares after a particularly rich dinner. Nothing to worry about." My relief was immense, almost debilitating. We moved quickly through the labyrinthine alleys, a blur of dark shapes in the fog, until we reached a prearranged rendezvous point. A quiet, secluded mews, where a cab was waiting, its driver discreetly reading a newspaper. The ride back to Albany was a blur of exhaustion and exhilaration. Back in Raffles's chambers, the baccarat table was once again cleared, and upon it, Raffles carefully emptied the contents of the padded pouch. The serpent's eye necklace glittered under the gaslight, a magnificent, dangerous trophy. "Well, Arthur," Raffles said, a hint of satisfaction in his voice, "your future has just become considerably brighter." The division of the spoils was swift and fair. Raffles, ever the professional, had contacts. Within days, the necklace was discreetly moved, traded for a sum that was truly astronomical. My share, a surprisingly generous portion, was enough to pay off every last penny of my gambling debts, the bad checks, and even leave a substantial sum for me to start fresh. I paid off my creditors, sending the proper bank drafts, watching the relief wash over their faces, oblivious to the true source of my newfound solvency. The shame of being a bankrupt was lifted, but it was replaced by a new, heavier burden. The secret. The secret of my complicity, of the thrill I had felt, and of the man I was becoming. I tried to rebuild my life as Arthur Finch, literary man. I rented a new flat, modest but respectable, far from the shadows of Mount Street. I started writing again, but the words felt hollow. The old social circles, once so important, now seemed trivial, their conversations vapid. I was financially stable but morally adrift. The echoes of the emerald, its cold gleam, the adrenaline of the heist, haunted my quiet moments. I tried to distance myself from Raffles, avoiding his calls, feigning illness when he suggested a game of cricket. But the bond of shared secret was a powerful, insidious thing. Months passed. My literary endeavors felt like a facade. The money was a constant reminder of how it was acquired. I felt like a fraud. One damp autumn evening, a note arrived from Raffles. No return address, just his elegant script. It read, "Dinner, tomorrow, 8 p.m. Croft has reason to be vexed." My blood ran cold. Croft? Had he discovered something? Was this a trap? My initial panic slowly gave way to a grudging curiosity. I found myself at Albany at 8 o'clock sharp, dressed in my finest, a strange mix of dread and anticipation churning in my stomach. Raffles was, as ever, perfectly composed. "Arthur," he greeted, "I trust you're well. Croft is indeed vexed. Apparently he's discovered the true value of the Serpent's Eye, and is convinced it was an inside job, though he has no proof. He's offering a substantial reward for its recovery, so substantial one, in fact, that it might be tempting." "Tempting?" I scoffed. "To return stolen goods for a reward? That's mad." Raffles chuckled. "Not to return them, my dear man. To offer information leading to their recovery, for a fee, of course. Perhaps a clue, a false lead, a suggestion that the necklace has merely been misplaced in a particularly secure location, one that Croft will never find, but for which he would gladly pay a significant sum for the mere hope of its return. And he's already approached some rather unsavory individuals, desperate to get it back." My stomach clenched. This wasn't about escaping ruin anymore. This was about profiting from the very crime we had committed, preying on a man's desperation. It felt dirtier, more malicious than the initial theft. The Serpent's Eye was an injustice, yes, but this was truly criminal. "No," I said, my voice firmer than I thought possible. "No, Raffles. I won't. I've paid my debts. I'm done." Raffles raised an eyebrow, a flicker of surprise in his cold blue eyes. "Done with adventure, Arthur? With freedom from the crushing mediocrity of honest toil? You've tasted the heights, my friend. You've seen what true ingenuity can achieve." "I've seen what it costs," I retorted, the words burning with a newfound conviction. "It costs my soul, Raffles, and I'm not willing to pay that price anymore." A long silence stretched between us, broken only by the crackling fire. Raffles studied me, his expression unreadable. For a moment I feared scorn, anger, perhaps even a threat. But then, a subtle shift, a faint, almost imperceptible nod. "Very well, Arthur," he said, his voice surprisingly devoid of malice. "It seems my gopher has grown a spine. A rather inconvenient development for me, but perhaps admirable. You will find that some doors, once opened, cannot be entirely closed. But I respect your decision. For now." He turned away, dismissing me. I grabbed my hat and left, the Albany air feeling lighter than it had in months. I didn't look back. The echoes of the emerald, though, never fully faded. I continued my writing, finding a new depth and authenticity in my words. My experiences, however illicit, had given me a unique perspective on human nature, on desperation, on the thin line between law and survival. My prose became sharper, my characters more complex. I wrote under a pseudonym, fearing exposure, but my work began to find a readership. The thrill of words, of crafting compelling narratives, slowly replaced the dangerous allure of illicit gains. My life wasn't normal, again, not entirely. The memory of the opulent interiors of Croft's house, the cold gleam of the emeralds, the silent precision of Raffles remained etched in my mind. Sometimes a newspaper headline would catch my eye, a daring jewel theft, an unsolved mystery, and a knowing glance would pass between myself and the reflection in the glass. I never sought out Raffles again, nor did he explicitly seek me. Our paths diverged, yet the knowledge of our shared secret, the bond forged in the crucible of a desperate night, remained an unspoken understanding. I had paid my debts, not just the financial ones, but the moral ones too, by choosing a different path. The emerald had freed me from one kind of prison, but nearly trapped me in another. I was a man changed, shaped by the shadows, but now choosing to step, however tentatively, back into the light. And in my stories, the echoes of that audacious heist, the tension, the desperation, and the quiet triumph of finding one's own way, lived on, transformed into art. A strange, complex, but ultimately my own symphony.
That's it, folks. If you enjoyed this journey into the world of English, please subscribe to English Tale Box for more captivating narratives and language insights. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to share this video with anyone who loves a good story or is learning English. Thank you for watching.